Hey everybody, Dr. Joe's in the house, and hope you're doing well wherever you are. And yeah, so we got another week of interesting stuff going on. Um, Interest rates are where they are, market is where it is, and I think a lot of people are getting frustrated. The market is really soft, but that's okay. We go through these cycles, on a regular basis. So, as a buy and hold investor, especially with Section 8, it's not so impacted. At least I'm not so impacted as other people are, especially flipping another of these short term strategies. But today, I wanted to pick a topic which I thought was, I was posed this question, why are you doing all this? And I told them financial independence, financial freedom. And so it begs the question, your rental should fund your freedom and not steal it. Not everybody, who delves into real estate has positive and, successful experiences. That's the topic for today. And as always, I'm going to break it into 5 parts today. So 5 sections. And but before I get too far, just let you know, for those people who are in the Washington, D.C. area, I'm going to be a panel member at the Grid Conference in Tyson's Corner, Virginia on Monday. I've been invited to be a panel member. And my focus will be on while others panic, Section 8 investors get paid. While others panic, Section 8 investors get paid. So essentially, it's the idea is that as the market turns, a lot of people panic. They don't make as much money as they used to. Strategies that was successful during the good times aren't so successful now. The saying goes, I think it was Warren Buffett, you really do find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. So when the tide goes out, you really do understand, who's swimming naked. Because when the market's good, everybody thinks they're doing great. Everybody thinks they're a genius. Everyone thinks that how great I am, and which is okay. But in reality, the reason why you're so great is because the market's good. Not so much because you're good, but it's just that the market is good, and I forgot the saying, all boats, rising boats live so tight. I don't know, whatever that saying goes. Maybe you could tell me what that saying goes. But when the tide goes out, that's really when you find out if your strategy, what made you successful, is in fact, can survive the test of time. And a lot of people are finding out that maybe they're not so great. It's just that the market was able to bail them out. And bad decisions, in these times, you get punished. So yeah. So I'll talk about, So anyway, so that's the reason why I'm talking about on Monday is how I've been able to survive 35 years of real estate investing through good and bad times. And I'll just tell you, the only reason I've been able to survive is because of the Section 8 strategy. That's the only reason. And without that, I would have probably tanked like many other investors. And, there hasn't been a month in 35 years where I haven't got my monthly rent. If the market tanks, people lose their jobs. My rent still, for the most part, gets paid as long as the tenant is in the house. So, some people may foo-foo the Section 8 strategy, but it's been time tested and it works. And I think I'm a testament to that. And that's not bragging, because I don't need to brag. It's just that it's real, it's legit. And it's the proof is it's stood the test of time. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters, because fads come and go. What's hot today is cold tomorrow. And you see people come in, guns blazing, saying how, you too can do this, you can do that. It's easy. And, and then you check in a few years later and they're gone, and so on. So, it is what it is. So I'll just leave it at that, and so on. So I'll be talking on Monday. So if you're in Virginia or in the DC area, it's the Grid Conference. I think you can register at GridCon 2026 or something like that. But check it out. I'll be there on Monday afternoon. I'll be one of the panelists, and so on. And I think I've been invited to Atlanta for it's a family affair conference. So if you're in the Atlanta area, I think middle of June, June 11th through 14th, I'll be over there. And so I look forward to seeing you. Feel free to register. It's a family affair. And if you're interested, just let me know. I think I can send you a QR code to get a discount. And then finally, I think I've been invited to be a guest speaker in July at the National Association of Hispanic Realtors event up in Virginia as well. So yeah, it's all good. But today we're going to talk about your rentals should fund your freedom and not steal it, So as usual, if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box and I'll get to them about 20 minutes from now. And if you want to book a one-on-one with me where we can do a deep dive in any questions or issues that you're facing, by all means, go to my website, www.joeasimo.com, www.joeasimo.com, and you can book a one-on-one with me where we can do a deep dive into any issues or problems that you're facing. So break it into 5 parts. So I'll start off with, the intro, which is, many investors learn the hard way. Real estate investing is not easy. It isn't easy. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It takes time. It takes hard work. It takes systems. It takes relationships. It takes knowledge. And I think when people realize that, they move on to something else. I don't know, Amway or Amazon or whatever the fad is of the day, because they want the glory without the hard work. And so for many real estate investors, the dream started with a promise of passive income, financial independence, flexibility, and the ability to enjoy life on their terms, okay? But the idea of collecting rent checks, building equity, and creating generational wealth, sounded exciting. It sounds great. It sounds achievable. Yet for countless landlords, and investors, the reality is something very different. Instead of freedom, they find themselves trapped in nonstop cycles of tenant complaints, contractor problems, maintenance emergencies, missed vacations, sleepless nights, and operational chaos. That's not what they signed up for. Because one of the greatest hidden dangers in residential real estate investing, in my opinion, and also building a portfolio, is doing that without systems and structure. Is just a recipe for disaster. We spend many times chasing acquisitions, buying stuff, increasing the unit count that we have, increasing the number of doors, that we accumulate, while completely ignoring the operation side of this thing, the operation side of this business. This is, how do you get from day one or month one or year one through to year 5, year 10, year 15? That's all about operations. And many people get caught up in, well, I need to get more doors. I need to get more doors. But having doors without the operations in place is not good. So the result is really predictable: stress, burnout, frustrations, poor decision making, and a business that really requires you to be personally involved in every detail. The very portfolio that you wanted to create, it's really taken away your peace of mind, your sanity, your health, your time with your family, and so on. It's burning you out. So, but in reality, the investors who ultimately achieve long-term wealth and success see things differently. They understand that we can't just create financial freedom by itself. It requires operational structure. It requires strong tenant relationships. It requires effective delegation, clear communication, proper vendor management, and so forth. So it's like building a business, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a deep dive into each of those aspects, which hopefully will help you avoid some of the mistakes that I've made and allow you to, as the saying goes, in order to finish first, in order to finish first, you must first finish. Got that? In order to finish first, you must first finish. What that means is that in order to get to the rainbow, you got to get there, and so you've got to, if you want to achieve financial independence and all that kind of things, you got to have certain things in place in order to get there without crashing and burning. So let's talk about each of these 5 steps in one at a time. So the first one is the freedom myth that traps investors. The freedom myth that traps investors. And the question is, why do so many investors pursue rental properties for freedom only to become overwhelmed, exhausted, and constantly stressed? Why do many people have all these great dreams, but once they get on this journey, they realize it's not always cracked up to be? Sometimes feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and constantly stressed out. Well, many investors enter residential real estate believing the business will naturally create passive income and flexibility. That's the ideal, or that's the goal coming in. They imagine a future where rental income covers their expenses while they enjoy more free time with their family, time with friends, time with loved ones, financial security, and peace of mind. However, unfortunately, many quickly discover that ain't happening. Okay, it's constant interruptions, emergencies, and operational headaches. The biggest mistake many investors make is confusing ownership with freedom, i.e., confusing ownership. Just because you own this stuff doesn't necessarily mean you got financial freedom. Simply owning properties does not automatically create operational efficiencies. It just doesn't. In fact, every additional property, it introduces more problems, more tenant concerns, more maintenance requests, more contractor coordination issues, more bookkeeping, more responsibilities, more stress. Okay. And so if you fail to create the systems early, and I'll talk about some of these later on, you'll get yourself personally involved in every problem that occurs. You're the one dealing with all these situations. Your phone becomes an extension of your business, and your portfolio, becomes emotionally and mentally draining. Many unsuccessful investors also underestimate the emotional toll of operating without structure. It's like fighting fires all the time. Been there, done that. Constant emergencies created frustrations, exhaustion, and burnout. Vacations, huh? You know what that is? Become stressful because investors fear problems occurring while they're away. Family dinners are interrupted by maintenance calls. Investors are becoming reactive, instead of being proactive, and constantly putting out fires instead of strategically growing your business. Now, that's on the negative side. On the plus side, the investors who have been able to overcome this realize that freedom requires designing operational systems that reduce chaos and create sort of consistency. Okay, we implement maintenance procedures. If this happens, do that. If this occurs, then do this. I have home warranties on all my properties. It's expensive, but in the end, I've just realized that it's a cost worth paying, because if electrical, plumbing, heating, mechanical, appliances issues come up, if I can fix them, or not me, but if I can get one of my guys to fix it, fine. If not, then I just call the home warranty company and let them deal with it. My tenants appreciate the fact that I'm working on the issue. I'm not, dodging them. I'm not trying to find my appliance guy. I don't know where he is, and so on. So, so the idea is maintenance procedures, communication systems, checking in with your tenants on a regular basis, make sure that they're happy, make sure there are no issues, tenant screening procedures, making sure the right people come into your house in the first place. And financial controls. How do you know you're making money? Do you track your income and expenses? Do you have a good bookkeeper? How often do you check your accounts? I mean, all those things are key. Vendor relationships. Do you have a boatload of vendors, or do you have just a few trusted ones? And how often do you sort of check in with those folks? These are all important things that needs to be in place. It just does. And that doesn't happen by watching a YouTube video. It doesn't happen by watching a TikTok or Instagram video. It just doesn't. It takes somebody doing it. And normally that somebody is going to be you. And I'm not a great fan of entrusting management companies to do all this. I haven't found a good management company in 35 years. I'm sure there's some good ones out there. I just haven't found one. And so I do it myself. Now you may say, why? Well, that's another discussion. Anyway, instead of allowing the business to control them, they learn how to control the business. So that's on a starting point. Okay. And so again, number one, we talked about the myth of the myth that traps investors. And so let's get to number two, as to why your freedom is taken away from you. And that is tenant selection. Tenant selection determines your freedom. And I learned this the hard way. And the question is, could the wrong tenant quietly destroy your peace, profits, and long-term freedom? The wrong tenant. My hypothesis, for what it's worth, disagree if you feel like it. 80% of your problems as a landlord, as a buy and hold investor, it's just simply you just got the wrong person in your house. I mean, when the drywall goes out, when the appliance go out, when the heating goes out, yeah, you can put things in place for that. But if you got somebody you can't do business with, if you got somebody in your house who's nonstop drama, if you got someone who's not paying you, if you got someone who's calling the authorities or the city on you, that is stress. And and many times it's just the fact that you just got the wrong person in your house. So screening, in my opinion, is absolutely critical, because if you do a wrong job there, in most jurisdictions, especially like in the blue states, like we're in Washington D.C., New York, California, and some of these other places, it's easy to get someone in your house. It's a lot more difficult to get them out. Where we are in DC, it can take 6 months to a year and a half to get somebody out of your house. Okay. So one of the most important lessons experienced investors, like myself, has learned is that tenant selection directly impacts the quality of your life. Many investors focus heavily on acquiring properties, building up their number of doors, and really underestimating the importance of placing the right tenants into their homes. Poor tenant selection often leads to, I just call it the spiral of death. Things like late payments, property damage, lease violations, constant complaints, emotional exhaustion. The neighbors are constantly calling you, harassing you, say, who are these people in your house? Get them out of here, and so on. Oh my goodness, I've been there. It's not fun. Almost like, what's it? Caller ID. When your telephone rings, you know who's calling. It's your best friend, because, you can avoid people, especially avoid your tenants. And so successful investors understand that, every tenant contributed to operational stability, or operational chaos. Investors who constantly or consistently selected responsible, respectful, long-term, tenants. I mean, it's a blessing. It's a wonderful business if you can attract those kind of people. You get fewer emergencies, you get lower turnover, you got stronger cash flow, and you get significantly less stress. Right now, I know you guys may not believe me, but I'm averaging 8.1 years per tenant. 8.1 years per tenant over a portfolio, which is pretty extensive in a blue state. And so my position is that's not an accident. That's not a matter of just crossing my fingers and hope for the best. No, it's a systematic process all focused on what can I do as a landlord, as a housing provider to make sure my tenants are happy? Because if they're happy, they're going to pay their rent, they're going to take care of my property, less drama, and they stay a long time. My longest tenant, believe it or not, is 30 years. Yeah, 30 years. So it involves, your communication style, your personality, personal responsibility, the ability and just your willingness to put in the hard work for that. Unsuccessful investors, they rush the leasing process. They just want somebody in their home, to stop the bleeding for the fact that, the mortgage is not getting paid. This desperation, I call it desperation, it caused them to overlook what I call warning signs. They skip the verification process or accept tenants who created long-term problems. Okay, in many cases, the financial damage caused by one poor tenant, okay, far exceeds the cost of several months of vacancy. In other words, it's better sometimes to have your place empty than it is to have the wrong person in your home. So, it's all about screening. And that's a whole nother discussion, which I can talk about at another webinar or another live stream. So let's go to number 3. Hopefully this is good. If you got any questions, again, put them in the chat box and I'll get to you in about 10 minutes. Number 3 is systems create freedom. Systems create freedom. I kind of touched on this earlier on, but I'm going to delve into a bit more detail here, what I mean by that. Why do investors with strong systems seem calmer, more organized, and more scalable than everyone else? I have stress also, but it's not the same level as you go to a landlord tenant court, and I recommend everyone should go there at least once a quarter. Just go there, sit in the back of the room, and you observe what I call failed relationships. And that's when you see stress. The most successful residential real estate investors understand that systems are the foundation of scalability and operational freedom. Instead of relying on memory, emotions, or improvisation, we can try to create repeatable systems or repeatable processes that allows us to essentially do certain things regardless of the circumstances. Many struggling investors, they operated sort of reactively. They respond to maintenance issues on the fly. Only after tenants become frustrated, they search for contractors, during emergencies instead of building vendor relationships beforehand. They forget deadlines, overlook paperwork, and constantly operated under pressure. The absence of systems force them to, into a permanent state of stress. Successful investors, hopefully like you and I, we approach things differently. At least I do differently now. We create maintenance pursuits. I've explained some of that things which I do there. Leasing workflows. We use systems for a systematic approach for leasing or getting someone into your home. We have a move-in checklist, rent collection systems, inspection schedules, communications templates, and financial tracking processes. Each of those is a webinar in itself or a live stream in itself. But what systems do is it reduces confusion. It allows you to respond more efficiently and quickly, increases professionalism of your business, and also allows you to operate more smoothly. Perhaps most importantly, systems reduces dependency on the investor personally handling every task. Strong systems allows assistants, contractors, property managers, and team members to perform responsibly, consistently. Okay, so that's number 3, which is systems create freedom. And we're kind of halfway through, and we're just over halfway through. And if you got any questions, as I said before, please put them in the chat box, and I'll get to them shortly. And if you want to book a one-on-one with me, by all means, go to my website, www.joeasimo.com. www.joeasimo.com. You can book a one-on-one where we can do a deep dive into any problem situations that that you're facing. Okay, let's have a look. Number 4, burnout. Yeah, a lot of people get burnt out, and the question is, could investor burnout be one of the biggest threats or hidden threats to long-term building? Burnout is when you're overwhelmed, overloaded, and you just had enough. You want out if you can. Burnout rarely happens overnight. It just takes time. It develops slowly through years of stress, overwork, constant emergencies, and lack of boundaries. Many investors, we ignore the warning signs because we feel like we can do it all ourselves. They believe that nonstop work was simply part of the business. Unfortunately, burnout often results in poor decision making, damaged relationships, decline in health, and eventually loss of motivation. So many investors become emotionally trapped by their portfolios because they never created operational procedures between their business and their personal lives. They essentially are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Vacations become stressful because they can't relax. Constantly being interrupted by phone calls and emails and text messages. The business consumes them totally. Successful investors, hopefully like you and I, learn the importance of protecting our time, our health, and our emotional well-being. We create office hours if we can, establish communications boundaries, delegate responsibilities, and develop operational systems, which I've talked about before, that reduces unnecessary emergencies. Case in point, we've had a lot of rain in the last few days here. So, when I hear that there's going to be some heavy rain, I send a text message to all my tenants to make sure that, especially the basement drains. It's, in the DC area, most of the houses have basements. And so there's usually a drain outside the house, at the front of or the back. And if that drain gets clogged either because of leaves or dirt or whatever it is, then when it rains heavy, that water has nowhere else to go but ultimately back into the house. So I send a message to my tenants, hey, we're going to be experiencing some heavy rains. Please check the front and rear drains to make sure they're clean and not clogged and so on. So that little simple message is part of the systems. And so I don't get calls during these heavy storms that my basement is flooded and so on. These are systems. And why? Because I've had calls when it rained heavy and I had to go and deal with those things. So, long-term sustainability requires balance. The investors who have stood the test of time, it's important. Physical health, emotional stability, family relationships, ministry, travel, and personal fulfillment. That's what's important for me. My physical health, emotional stability, spending time with my family, building relationships with them, travel, personal fulfillment, and so on. So I've got to get that balance, and by having certain things in place, I avoid being burned out. I remember when I was in the corporate world, I was just working all the time, and but burnout is a serious thing because you got to take care of your health. That's all there is. You only get one body, and at the end of the day, if you don't take care of your body, then it's not good. I think I'm realizing that more often now, especially as I get a little older, a little wiser as well. Huh? Okay, number 6, build a portfolio that supports your life. And what does that mean? It means that what if the true goal of real estate investing was not just wealth, but freedom and quality of life? Many investors spend years focused exclusively on acquiring more properties without asking themselves a critically important question. What kind of life are you trying to build? What kind of life? Why are you doing all this? Most successful investors eventually realize that real estate was not the ultimate goal, but freedom was. Investors who achieve both wealth and fulfillment intentionally design portfolios that are aligned with their personal values, long-term lifestyle goals, and they set priorities. I want to travel. I want to visit at least 5 or 6 countries every year now. I've done 4 so far this year, and I've still got a couple more to do. Others prioritize ministry, family time, flexibility, health, stress reduction, and so on. So you understand what's important for you, and you structure accordingly. Unsuccessful investors, we chase growth strategy without strategy. We acquire properties in poor locations, accept difficult tenants. We operate without systems and create businesses dependent entirely on our or individual personal constant involvement. More units simply doesn't always is not always better. More is not always better. It can create more chaos. Successful investors approach portfolios very differently. We focus on operational efficiency, stable tenant relationships, strong property standards, reliable systems, and sustainable growth. So we understand that the purpose of building wealth is to create options, flexibility, and opportunities to enjoy life. So put it all together. Too many residential real estate investors, in my opinion, enter the business believing rental properties alone would automatically create passive income, flexibility, and freedom. Okay, that's the goal. Unfortunately, we learned the hard way that it's not always that way. End up people getting stressed out, burnt out, maintenance emergencies, tenant problems, nonstop drama, and so on. The very portfolios that was designed to improve your life slowly begins to control your life. Investors who ultimately achieve sustainable or scalable success, we understood certain things. Critically important. Freedom is not or is not created by ownership alone. Freedom is created by system structure, tenant selection, delegation, operational efficiencies, communications, intentional business design, etc. Successful investors like you and I hopefully learned that, we learn how to reduce chaos, how to improve consistency, and build businesses capable of operating effectively without requiring our constant personal involvement. So throughout this discussion today, hopefully it was enlightening. The lessons from both successful and unsuccessful investors really, I think reveal the importance of approaching real estate investing like a business. Rather than simply a collection of properties. Investors who prioritize systems, relationships, boundaries, operational support, and long-term sustainability really position themselves well to enjoy not only financial growth, but also peace of mind, flexibility, travel, family time, health, and personal fulfillment. So real estate investing should ultimately create options for you, opportunities for you, and freedom for you, not constant stress and exhaustion. So that is it, my friend. Hopefully that was enlightening, and hopefully that was a good 20 minutes or so of discussion. And as usual, if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'm going to get to them in about 2 minutes. If you want to shoot me an email, you can email me at joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah.com. And if you want to book that's if you want to shoot me an email. If you want to book a one-on-one, you go to my website, joe@joeasamoah.com, or www.joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com. My friends, I'll go to some questions. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So we have Dao2. Hey, Dao2, how you doing, man? From Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, desert country. Welcome. First time listener, watcher. Okay, welcome. This is from EJ Mike. So J Mike 808. Hope you're doing well, J Mike 808. And let's have a look. When I find a Section 8 tenant, this is from Nesta Can. When I find a Section 8 tenant I want to rent to, what are the next steps? I understand you have to take their packet down to the housing authority. Okay, so in this situation, Nesta Can has got a rental property and he has selected a tenant who has a voucher. And so once he selected a tenant, the next thing is to, there's what they call an RFTA, request for tenancy approval document, that has to be completed. Because right now, the relationships between you and the tenant or the prospective tenant, the housing authority is unaware that you have found this tenant. So you need to notify them that you've located the tenant for your property, let's just say at 123 Main Street. And so the way to do that officially is through this RFTA. So it's a packet that usually it can be obtained from the housing authority wherever your property is located. Usually it's on the website. You can download and then you can complete it. It's going to ask for information about you, your property, who's responsible for utilities. It's going to ask for information about the tenant, who they are, what size voucher they are. And so it's a whole bunch of information that they're going to require that you provide yourself. Also, they want to know your bank account, who you bank with, what's your account number. You got to provide proof that you actually own the asset. It's not, you're not trying to rent somebody else's house. So they typically want a copy of your deed to prove ownership. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you have to provide them. So once you have all that stuff together, then you submit that to the local housing authority for their review. And that kicks off, a process where they'll review your documentation, make sure it's complete, make sure there's nothing missing, make sure that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I mean, some of these folks are real nitpickers, so you got to make sure everything is done right. So I double check, triple check, quadruple check to make sure all the documents that I need have been included. So once you submit that then puts the housing authority on notice that you have a property at 123 Main Street. You found a tenant, I don't know, Miss Jones, and you'd like to rent to her, and so on. So that is that's what happens next. Let's have a look. I understand you take the packet. Well, you don't have to take it down there. Many times you can email it, or sometimes these housing authorities have what we call a portal, where you can upload your documents to. And I think you got a second part. How long is the process to get the ball rolling? Is there a lot of paperwork involved? Yeah, how long does the process take? It depends on your jurisdiction where you are. In Washington, D.C., for example, the policy that they're trying to reach is that if you submit the paperwork by the 5th of the month, then the tenant can usually move in on the 1st of the following month. So if you submit the paperwork, let's say on June the 5th of this year, then typically the tenant will then move in there July the 1st. If you submit on the 6th, all bets are off. There's no guarantees. It may be July the 1st. It may not be. If it's not, then it's going to be August the 1st. Okay, so in DC, the deadline is midnight on the 5th. And so that's what you're chasing if you want the tenant to move in there the 1st of the following month. So that's the process. There's a bunch of reviews that has to take place. They have to determine the rent. And then there's an inspection that has to take place, by the housing authority to make sure your property meets what they call housing quality standards, HQS, and so on. So that's the process. Is there a lot of paperwork involved? Yeah, there's quite a bit that you have to assemble. But once you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't take me much time to pull that together. But for somebody who's starting out, it could be a little, overwhelming sometimes, but it's okay. Again, if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Let's have a look. We've got quite a few people on Instagram. I don't see any questions on Instagram, but we're seeing quite a few people on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, hi, and let me know if you have any questions that you want to pose to me in the next couple of minutes, and so on. So let's have a look. I think that's about it for today. It's 7:43 now. So again, if you're in the DC area, I'm going to be a guest, a panel member at a conference, GridCon, on Monday. So if you're in the area, please join me. You can register. And if you want to book a one-on-one with me, by all means, you can go to my website, www.joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com, and you can sign up for there. If you want to shoot me an email, please shoot me an email at joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah. Hopefully today's session was informative, enlightening, and I enjoy preparing for these Wealth Wednesday. I'm learning as I prepare, so I'm always trying to grow myself, and hopefully this is informative to you as well. So with that said, my friends, I'm going to wish you a wonderful rest of the evening, and let's have a look. Any more questions on Instagram before I wrap it up? And no more on Instagram. So I'll see you next Wednesday, God willing. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.